Hello, this week we're talking about the cost of food shopping. Can anything be done to avoid unwelcome price rises in the bagging area?
This is a colleague announcement. Dreadful pun clean-up on aisle 3.
Welcome to Politics South East. In the next half hour, how to tackle the cost of food as the rise in prices over recent years continues to put household budgets under strain.
Doing a weekly shop is like doing a Christmas shop now. A lot of baby stuff is quite expensive now.
Basically, all vegetables have gone up.
We meet a Sussex carer who gave up his nursing job to look after his son.
It doesn't just stop for us as carers. We need help forever. As far as I'm concerned, that's the way I see it. Because I will not go to work, I'll always make sure I'm there for Theo.
And after local elections, it's all change in East and West Sussex, but with coalitions and minority administrations on the rise, can our politicians work together to deliver for voters? I'm Helen Catt, and joining me on the sofa this week is Tony Vaughan, the Labour MP for Folkestone and Hythe, Katy Bourne, the Conservative Police and Crime Commissioner for Sussex, and the new Reform UK leader of East Sussex County Council, Andy Woolley. Welcome to you all. Now, before we get stuck into this week's topics, and because we have a Police and Crime Commissioner here with us this week, I do want to touch on a story that has dominated the news this week, and that is anti-racism guidance in the police. It follows the release of body cam footage of officers attending the murder of Henry Novak in Southampton. Katy, are the police in the right place with anti-racism guidance and training at the moment?
Well, I think before I answer that, and I'm sure Tony and Andy would agree with me, we would like to say what a tragedy this has been, and the dignity and the courage that the Novak family have shown throughout this is incredible. So I think just recognising that is the right thing to do. Are the police right to do anti-racism in the way they do it? I think was your question, was it? Yes. They have a guidance, and it is guidance set by the National Police Chiefs Council. It comes under the whole operational side of policing. I think when the guidance was written, there was a lot of concern that the police around some of the stop and search that they were undertaking was perhaps on the heavy-handed side. And so they brought this guidance in, and it's right that the police are trained, but I'm pleased personally that it's now under review.
Why is that?
Well, there were aspects of it that I was never comfortable with, but at the end of the day, you know, I can only challenge and
you
hold
can't
to
change
account.
them as the Commissioner?
No, because it's the decision of Chief Constables ultimately. But at the end of the day, my job is to scrutinise and challenge. But then you've also got the Inspectorate, the Her Majesty's Inspectorate of Constabulary, who then inspect to those standards. So my job is to ensure then that the standards that are set are being adhered to. But, you know, I think we would all welcome the review.
I mean, Andy, I'd like to bring you in on this. Your party this week has been raising concerns about two-tier policing, as they call it. I mean, do you believe that's what we have?
I think it's too early to judge on these things. I just think that there's been an operational failure, I think, on this one. I welcome the investigation into this situation. I admire, and I couldn't have done what Henry's father did outside that court the other day, being a father of children of similar age. And I just think things need to be looked at, because we need fair policing for everybody, regardless of that.
And we should say, of course, the IOPC is investigating the handling of this. And Tony, I mean, Katy referred to it earlier. There have been problems with relationships between the police and minority communities in the past. Does that still need to be recognised?
Absolutely. I mean, if we look at the figures for Kent, I think a black person is almost three times more likely to be subject to the use of force than white people. There's a much higher incidence of stop and search, for example. So these quite long-standing differences in the way different groups are treated are facts, they're real. And so the idea, and it's good to hear from colleagues on the sofa here, a quite balanced approach to this issue, because that's not what we've been hearing from all politicians this week. I mean, it was an utterly despicable approach which the leader of Reform UK took in creating division from this, when the family have rightly called for calm and for not to exploit that. But I think we have to be absolutely clear that this kind of training is absolutely needed, and if it needs to be tightened up, that's what has to be looked at in the context of this investigation.
Well, look, this is a very sensitive and complex topic, and it takes more time than we have this morning to get into it fully, but it is good to hear your thoughts.
And to give that reassurance that, certainly in Sussex Police, there is no two-tier policing. Everybody is equal under the law. And that is exactly how our Chief Constable and I tackled that. Sussex Police was very clear that they are not institutionally racist. Our Chief Constable never took the knee because everybody is equal under the law and needs to be policed equally.
OK, well, look, we will move on. We may come back to this in later weeks. Now, if you've been out to do your big shop this weekend, one thing you've probably noticed is how much it costs. These people in Uckfield certainly have.
Doing a weekly shop, it's like doing a Christmas shop now. Yeah. Bread especially, milk, all the things, fruit is really expensive.
I suppose, yes, it is more expensive, but I refuse to be hungry.
Basically, all vegetables have gone up and it's, just a bit of a nightmare.
A lot of baby stuff is quite expensive now that she just eats whatever we could buy the cheapest.
So how much more is it costing us? Well, let's have a look at a couple of examples. According to the Office for National Statistics, the average price of a litre of whole dairy milk has risen from £1.56 in 2025 to £1.72 this year. That's an increase of 11%. Non-dairy milk has also become more expensive, rising by 3%. Veg has gone up too. The price of carrots, turnips and similar vegetables has increased by 23% over the past year. And comparing today's prices with those in 2021, research by the Energy and Climate Intelligence Unit suggests food prices are on track to be 50% higher by November 2026 than they were at the start of the cost of living crisis. Now, the government says it's trying to tackle the cost of food, but what about the people who grow and produce it? Many of them are in Ardingly this weekend at the South of England show, including Charles Burgoyne, who is the president of the South of England Agriculture Society. We spoke to him a little earlier and asked what costs farmers were facing and what more he'd like to see from the government.
Well, since the budget, which was introduced by the government a year and a half ago, we've had dramatic price increase in the agricultural sector, indeed in all business across this country. National insurance is obviously something that they should indeed look at again. And on top of that, there's this ghastly inheritance tax situation. Farmers do not make a lot of money. They do it for the love, they do it because they want to feed the nation. On top of that, government is introducing taxes on fertiliser next year, which will add another 40, 50, 60 pounds a tonne to the price of fertiliser. Fuel prices this year have doubled, as we all know. For my example, that adds nearly £100,000 to our fuel bills.
Tony, let's start with you. Could the government be doing more to help farmers with those costs and to help customers with the costs?
Well, we've got this squeeze situation where the cost of the inputs, as the farmer was explaining, which a constituent called Mike Rout, I was grateful that he showed me around his farm recently. There was, as the contributor said, the fertiliser prices going up and not helped by the war in Iran, the energy costs, all of these things making it much more expensive to produce food. And at the same time, we have the supermarkets kind of turning on the screws to essentially cause a situation where farmers are selling at a loss in many cases. And so one thing that the government is doing is to kind of bring the watchdog on how the supermarkets negotiate these contracts with farmers in-house so that they can exercise a lot tighter control over the way those arrangements are made.
Well, you should say the British Retail Consortium we spoke to before the programme, and they say that their supply chains are strictly regulated by the Grocery Codes Adjudicator and that they are doing everything possible to both cushion customers while rewarding British farmers.
And it is that adjudicator which is coming into DEFRA now rather than where it was before as an arm's length body, and the government has to be able to exert much more control over that watchdog, because if we're in a situation where farmers are saying that we're being squeezed to the bone with supermarket prices not being essentially enough to cover costs, and that is something that's urgently needs to be addressed, and that's what the government's doing.
I mean, the government is also it's said that it's consulting on suspending tariffs on more than 100 of what they describe as essentials. So among those, baked beans, nectarines, garlic, vegetable oil. Andy, is that a good idea?
I don't think it is. I've listened to the arguments in the last week, and I think you have to allow for market dynamics to actually play out and set the price of these food. It's interesting that you had you had on the graphics, you talked about milk. Before I was elected, I was out talking to farmers because I come from a semi-rural area where I live, and farmers were telling me that to produce a litre of milk it was 42 pence, and from the supermarkets they were at that time getting 29 pence for that same litre. There's not many businesses, I don't think, that for their product to sell at such a loss could continue into business. And at the same time, the inheritance tax was being knocked, and the average age of farmers in Sussex is 63. So there's no new farmers coming through, and a lot of people are being put off coming into the trade and into the industry because there's not money in it. They can't earn a living.
But in terms of the customer, the consumer, Katy, this idea of reducing tariffs so that the food is cheaper for people at the checkout, what do you make of it?
Food price caps don't work. They tried it in the 70s. I'm old enough to remember it. And I think they tried it in Hungary recently, and it failed dramatically because it pushes wrong things happening. But at the end of the day, let's face it, this government are waging war on farmers. More than 60% of Sussex, the county that I serve as police commissioner, is rural or super rural, and the farmers feel under threat. The inheritance tax, the family farm tax, energy prices are pushed up. Yes, the war in Iraq, the war in Ukraine and others hasn't helped. But let's face it, we've got a zealot energy secretary who is ideologically driven and won't drill for gas and oil in the North Sea, that would easily keep our energy prices down.
Well, that would have absolutely no effect on prices, and it.
Oh, it absolutely would.
I mean, economists do question that actually that would make any direct impact.
Well, I think the Conservatives have been very clear around their plan that they have to tackle this. But at the end of the day, the farmers. I was at the South of England show on Friday. And the farmers that I spoke to there, so I had a breakfast with them, were saying things like, this government, Steve Reed, before they were elected in 24, came in saying, we're the friends of the farmers. And then one of the first things they did was the family farm tax. Last year, without any consultation, they took away the SFI scheme to new entrants.
Well, that was ended by the Conservatives in 2024 and left farmers on a cliff edge.
You ended that in 2025 without any consultation to farmers.
It was ended before we came in.
It was last year that it came in. And the SFI, the new entrants to it, were completely stopped. They have got to take the farming industry with them. Food security is part of a government's first, importance in government is the security of its people. That includes food security. That includes energy security.
I do just want to bring Tony back in because, Katy talked about the idea of price caps, which the SNP, for example, has suggested for Scotland. I mean, is there an argument for more intervention at the pricing end? Because feeding yourself and your family, that is a basic need, isn't it? We heard the man in Uckfield there saying that he refuses to go hungry. I mean, for some people, that's not a choice.
Absolutely, and the government has to ensure that people can buy food at the right price. One of the things the government's doing is putting almost 12 billion quid into sustainable farming incentives so that there can be sustainable food supplies. For all the reasons that we've just heard, that it's really important that the government does those things, and ultimately it has to be a question of allowing prices to be regulated in the right way, that people can afford it. And that's what that whole idea about bringing this watchdog in-house is all about. But fundamentally, it's about the 12 billion quid that's being put into the system to ensure that prices remain stable.
And can I just ask you, we heard Charles there from the South of England show from the Agricultural Society saying the government's going to bring in a tax on fertiliser next year. Should the Chancellor be looking to scrap that?
Well, look, these things do have to be looked at very carefully. And as I said, the farmer that I spoke to very recently was already talking about massive increases in fertiliser prices, energy prices. And when these kind of input costs go up so much for reasons that are outside many of our control, that it is really important that the government does think carefully about whether taxes in those specific ways are going to result in positive outcomes both for farmers and consumers. And I think there is a real point there to think about.
And Andy, what would reform do? If you were in charge, how would you help bring down the cost of food? I
think we would just support the farming community. Reform has always been a big supporter of the farming community, and this is just bonkers about putting taxes on fertilisers and things like that. That's not showing support for the farmers. That's increasing costs even further. So how does that help with kind of food security and bringing prices down? Because all that is adding to them, and what they're planning to do, just squeeze the farmers even more. that's not helping the whole thing. It needs to be a joint discussion across the piece between the supermarkets, from field to shelf, and that whole discussion about where is the fair bit, what's the fair amount of profit that anyone should be making in that whole train, and where are the costs and how can we drive those down?
Okay, well, it sounds like you're all nodding there. That sounds like a good note to move on from. Now, caring for a loved one can be life-changing, especially if it means giving up work to provide that care. With Carers Week beginning tomorrow, a Sussex charity says many people don't actually realise they even are carers and could be entitled to support, like one dad from Eastbourne who quit his NHS job to look after his son. Marcella Whittingdale went to meet him.
What, you having this one? Okay, good boy. This one, yeah, okay.
12-year-old Theo has special needs and non-verbal autism. He needs round-the-clock care.
He needs to be watched 24/7 because he could climb that fence, go into the road. He doesn't understand that a car could hit him and things could go seriously wrong. My wife was getting scratched, her hair pulled, we were having bruises, being pushed down the stairs sometimes, and it was never his fault. It's just his communication, frustration would take over.
As Theo got bigger, the family started to worry more about his safety with both parents working. So Dad, Dale Gardner, left his job as a senior radiology assistant to become Theo's full-time carer.
I started to get scared simply because I didn't know what to do with my finances, how we were going to cope, what we would have to cut as a household. It doesn't just stop for us as carers. We need help forever, as far as I'm concerned. That's the way I see it. Because I will not go to work, I'll always make sure I'm there for Theo. But I need their help.
But leaving work meant sacrificing a regular income and taking on caring responsibilities around the clock. It was only after seeking help from the Sussex charity Care for the Carers that Dale learned the family could claim carers allowance. Miriam Wilkinson from the charity says people can take years to realise they qualify as an unpaid carer, only approaching the charity at crisis point.
You supporting someone, whether it's a relative, a friend, a neighbour, who could not manage without your help, you are an unpaid carer. It's about raising awareness so that people who might not consider themselves as providing care at supporting someone actually are aware of the fact that they are unpaid carers, that they can access support, and they come forward even to discuss things as they are now, because we find that lots of people come to support to charities like ours, to care for the carers and others, at the point of crisis. And that's very difficult. There will be multifaceted problems that carers will be facing at that point, and it is much harder than for us to provide that support.
The government say they're working to make the system fairer and simpler for unpaid carers, and that they've raised the amount that people can earn while still claiming carers allowance, while some carers might also be entitled to other benefits like universal or pension credit.
Care for the Carers also helped Dale's family bring down bills and surprise them with a £100 supermarket voucher, while a day trip to a beach hut in Bexhill was a chance for Theo, who loves the water, and the whole family to enjoy a bit of a break. But with almost 1 in 10 people in the South East estimated to be unpaid carers, the charity says it's vital they get the recognition and support they need so they're not left to face their significant challenges alone.
It's Dale and Theo there. Well, Andy, let's start with you, because carers, social care, that is a big issue that you have had to take on as the leader of East Sussex County Council. How are you planning to support carers and to tackle this?
Well, as Dale said in there, we East Sussex County Council supports the Care for Carers charity that was mentioned in that tape, along with the NHS. And it's important that it accounts, adult social care and child social care accounts for 80% of the total budget of East Sussex County Council. Just think about that. When people come and actually say, and during the election, what about the potholes? What about this? What about that? There's 20% of the budget left from total council tax that's actually raised that goes to all those other things, because we have a statutory duty. We've got over 600 children that we are now custodian parents of. And, you know, it's a big responsibility, and those costs are just going up and up and up every year.
Has it surprised you now you've seen the detail of that?
I didn't know the extent of that, you know, from the outside, looking at it as if I was a member, you know, a resident in my own area. I didn't know the extent of these things. Yes, it has opened my eyes to how much we actually spend on that, and it's a huge responsibility. But down at East Sussex, you know, we got people, that's their day job. They go in, they waking up, not because, you know, they don't think about, I'm not going to go to work today. They know that they have to go to work because they are supporting some of the most vulnerable people in the county. And that's why they get up, and they do a really good job.
I mean, Tony, is this something that government needs to be getting more of a grip of? The Labour promised in its manifesto a national care service, but we haven't really heard much more about that. What's going on?
Well, first of all, I want to pay tribute to Dale and all of the carers like him who are caring for children and really, really demanding situations where the state is increasingly supporting them with, and Marcella mentioned, the increase in eligibility for carers allowance. And there's a whole range of things the government's doing on that and looking into overpayment, something my office hears about a fair bit, where people have been charged, perhaps not knowing that they've been charged extra and then told to pay it back again. And that's something that's being looked at. But you're absolutely right. I mean, the Baroness Katy is looking at the viability of having a national care service. I think that's really important. I think the government has said that will report at some point in 2028. I think we need to be bringing that forward so that we can get our proposals out ASAP, because in a place like Kent, where we've got certainly Folkestone and Hythe an older population than a lot of other places, social care is actually one of those massive areas where we need people on the ground. There's a vacancy shortage, and it's fundamental that we can get that sorted so that we can unblock beds in the hospitals. We've got some real challenges in our hospital system as well, and social care is at the root of so many other problems, which if we could sort that, it would sort a lot of other problems as well.
So when would you like to see that brought forward too?
I think we need to do it as soon as possible. I don't think 2028 is soon enough, and I think everyone who is in the healthcare system, in the wider social care system. I mean, I was at a dementia cafe yesterday with some people who are really struggling to get what they need out of the system, with the support not being there. They need it as soon as possible, and everyone who needs that social care, you know, really needs these proposals to come out ASAP.
Katy, the Conservatives, when you were in government, you proposed various reforms to social care system, which didn't end up happening. But is this something that can be fixed by one government in one parliament, or actually do we need to be taking a longer term view with this?
I think some and some, actually. I mean, I think what we're not tackling here is the big elephant in the room. Yes, we've got 6 or 7 million carers nationally, I think, at any one time, and about 1 million carers come in and out of the system every 2 years. So if you're not caring now, it will be affecting you at some point in the future. And speaking as a carer of my mother before she passed away, I know the strain it can put on you as a family. But for me, the elephant in the room is the welfare budget. At the moment, the fact of the matter is that our welfare budget is greater than the income tax that is raised by government coming in. So actually, if you're not tackling that, then you're not going to have the funding to give to carers who desperately need it, like in Dale and Theo's story here. And, you know, how can it be that when a government is raising income tax, they're actually spending more out on welfare than they're getting coming in? So if the government can't grow the economy, which we clearly have seen they can't, because none of the front bench.
We do have the highest growth in the G7.
Let me finish. None of the.
That's a fact.
None
I mean,
of
you can scoff at it, but I mean, it is a fact. It is part of our manifesto.
Let me finish. None of the front bench have any business experience, so they can't grow the economy. If they can't tackle welfare, because every time they try, the backbenchers jump up and down and shout no. There's only 2 other things they can do: raise your income tax, or borrow more, and both of those will show us declining as an economy.
I can see Andy nodding there, but I will just give Tony just a chance to come back on that. Is it an either or? You've got to reduce the welfare bill to be able to do this?
It's not an either or. The principle that there needs to be reform in the welfare system, I do accept. I do accept that the way that we're going on is not sustainable for the long term. There's particular work that needs to happen and will be happening around how we get more youth into employment. We're spending, I think, £25 on welfare, and every £1 of that goes into access to work. I don't think that's the right position. So there are reforms that need to happen, but it is actually wrong to say that it's either that or it's this. There is the reason why this is so complicated and why the Conservatives didn't crack it, why Labour in the previous government didn't crack it is because it's complicated. I think we need to do it much more quickly, but it's not good enough just to fall back into sort of, tropes about welfare, because that's just actually going to penalise the very people that need the support.
OK, we are going to have to move on. I know you're desperate to come in, Katy, but I think we have to move on to our last topic. So the recent local elections saw big changes in the South East. West Sussex County Council is now run by a Rainbow coalition, while in East Sussex, Reform UK is running a minority administration led by Andy Woolley. So, Andy, as a minority administration, you are going to have to work with other parties to get things done. Does that mean that you are not going to be able to make the sort of changes and announcements that we've seen coming out of Kent, for example?
We're different to Kent. Does it mean that we can make the changes? There may be an element of change that we can have coming into East Sussex, but again we go back to what have we inherited. We've inherited a bit where we've got a lot of statutory requirements. Going back to the point that was made, we've got the oldest over 65 demographics in any county in the whole of England. All right. So that gives us our own problems. We've got, going back to that last piece on carers, there's 70,000 carers, over 70,000 carers in East Sussex. These all need to be supported. And, we have to work together. Local government is about partnership. It's about partnership, right? So when I was a parish councillor chairman, we left politics at the door because
Reform sort of famously doesn't do that. You refer to other parties as the uni party.
I don't. That's at national level. There's a lot of arguing going on. We see it every week on the TV, right? At local level, you have to do partnerships. You have to agree things with people. You have to find common cause. Because I didn't get elected because I was Reform. I got elected because we were the best choice, probably at this point in time, for East Sussex County Council.
And Katy, is local politics different to national politics in that way?
I think so, very much so. I mean, I've spent 13, nearly 14 years as Police and Crime Commissioner working across district and borough councils and the 3 top tier authorities. And the districts and boroughs, none of them are Conservative led, so they don't share my politics. You have to learn to collaborate with people. And I think if you can take out the politics and just keep focused on what it is you all want to achieve, then you will get that delivery that the public want. But they've made their decision. The public have voted in these coalitions, and certainly Andy's task ahead is a supply and confidence and supply issue at East Sussex. But we'll see. I mean, Reform's track record so far at local government isn't very impressive.
Okay, well, Tony, we've got about 20 seconds, if that. I mean, do you think there needs to be more working together?
Absolutely. No, I genuinely believe that we have to cooperate more. I mean, in Folkestone, for example, the collaboration between the Labour-run Town Council and the Green and the Lib Dem District Council has helped to put in train the Saving of Grace Hill Library, which is closed by Reform. I mean, that is real partnership working. We can have so many more examples of that and totally endorse the proposition. And I actually think there needs to be more collaboration at national level as well. And that's what I think we really need to work towards.
Collaboration rather than clobberation.
Well, that is a lovely note to end on. Well, that is all we have time for this week. Thanks very much to all my guests, Tony Vaughan, Katy Bourne and Andy Woolley, and to you for